Welcome back to the Education System Reboot channel. I'm going to take an opportunity to kind of dissect and reflect on an amazing slash crazy experience that I had today. So there's a lot of background, but hopefully what I'll tie in when I'm all said and done is just the reason and the power of personal growth, and why it should be a priority um, when we teach in any capacity. So I have to start by just sharing a little bit of, humbling myself a little bit, and just being clear about the idea. Anywhere from 5 to 8 to 10 years ago, the truth of the matter is, I was, although arguably I was successful in some areas personally in my own head, I was very anxious, very neurotic, always feeling guilt, shame, and didn't really want to. Um, I was always afraid of failing, and that manifested itself in just anxiety all the time. And I was always, again, trying to feel like I had to figure everything out, and if I didn't have an answer to something, I didn't want to let people know that. I was felt, you know, again, shame. This sense of I didn't want anybody to know how I didn't want anybody to know how little I knew. And then so in this channel, I've been sharing a lot of my story here and there periodically. And again, so about 5 years ago, I think about now, I started growing. Somebody introduced me the idea of good routines, personal growth books, audios, and just habits. And so over the last 5 years, I've improved what I consider exponentially in almost all those areas. And I think sometimes we don't know how much we've grown until we experience a situation that, if that same situation had happened, say, before we started growing, we would have folded like origami. Um, and this is, so now I have to kind of humble myself and share the story. So all the relevant information is that I'm taking a small group of kids, like 5 kids, and I own a minivan. And so it just made sense for me to transport them in there instead of getting a little van or activity bus or whatever it is. And it just made the most sense. And so I was coordinating all this stuff and getting the paperwork in. And so on my way to school this morning, the day before I'm supposed to take kids, I hit a deer. And it's interesting, I never hit a deer before. And the first interesting thing was my reaction after I was, it hit the deer and I was safe. I was just like, oh my gosh, like, of course this would happen today. So instead of freaking out, I actually kind of laughed a little bit. I just started laughing. I'm like, of course this had to happen today. That first thing that just happened is totally different than I would have done 5, 10, 15 years ago. Back then, I would have been freaking out, calling my parents, being in a panic, being dramatic. Like I would have been like most most of our students, and I would have been an adult. Which again, because I was an adult and having that reaction, I wouldn't want anybody else to see that. So I would use my parents. But again, it was just a reflection on how little I knew and how afraid I was of letting people know what I didn't know. But anyway, so fast forward through the day. So now, if you can put yourself in that I have this obligation with, I was going to drive kids in my van. Now all that's blown up. But again, I didn't panic, and I just kind of said, okay, there'll be a solution. I'll roll with it, or have faith, right? And anyway, you start fast forwarding through the day, and I still taught my first 2 classes, and then called my insurance during my prep, and everything started to work out, and got more information and filed the claim and started figuring out the process. Then I went to the small district office in our little district and said, okay, here's what's happened. Kind of laughed about it and joked about it, but we need to figure this out. And then so I found out we have an activity van on site that I can use, so we solved that. And even throughout the day, I was sharing little stories with the students about how it's like, how I'm reacting today is totally different than I would have reacted 5, 6 years ago. And so to me, this is the power of personal growth. The idea that, so I'm a big fan of a guy named Jordan Peterson, who hopefully I've referenced. He has many ideas, but one of them is to be the strongest person at your father's funeral. And what that means is when adversity strikes, be the person who has a level head, a cool head, and isn't freaking out. And again, I don't know, for some people, this little incident's like, well, that's nothing. And others, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you were able to handle it. But what I do know in the moment and in the day, as I went through, is my mindset was completely different. My anxiety was not there. Like, it all worked out. I had a colleague at the school who lives very close to where I live, so he was able to drive me home after school. I got it towed to where it needed to be. Like, it all kind of magically worked out. And it is, again, I just want to acknowledge that I know for a fact that the reason that I was able to handle this situation with more grace and dignity and understanding and not panic and less anxiety and no shame or guilt was simply because over the last 5 or 6 years, I have put amazing input into my brain. And now I say all this again, hoping that, again, if you come across this video, maybe you've had a personal experience like this, or maybe you recognize, or maybe you're recognizing that you are like the other person that I described, where anytime something bad happens, you ball yourself up in the fetal position or something. But anyway, what I'm just so, I guess, proud of, to be blunt, is that I just didn't panic, and I felt the ability to handle what life threw at me. And there were some other things that just kind of happened throughout the day where I'm just like, man, none of that would have happened. I was able to have a good conversation with a colleague and help them out on the drive home with the person that drove me home. And so I just find it fascinating how, there's this phrase that says everything happens for a reason. I used to not believe that at all. Okay, I didn't. But the more I think about it, the more that's true. But I think it's important that if you believe that, then you need to actually figure out the reason. The difference between saying everything happens for a reason and using that as an excuse and not going deeper, that's wrong to me. Saying everything happens for a reason and here's the reason. Like, I can see clearly all the little reasons of things happening today, and I can see going back all the little points along the journey that prepared me for this, right? The only preparation for tomorrow is the right use of today. Well, for the last 5-6 years, I've been using my day, especially my morning routine, better. And so again, in these moments, I feel prepared. It didn't phase me. And I just, again, when I think about that for education, okay, so let's tie it into it because this is an education channel. The person I described at the beginning of this video, the one that was not able to handle stuff, that's our students, right? So if we are not, along with teaching them content and teaching them the dates and the facts and the things, the knowledge they need to know, if we're not teaching them the habits, the skills to grow as a person, then how can we ever expect them to actually be able to handle adversity? That's what the message of this video is. So it's funny, I don't even know what I'm going to title this video, but anyway, the point is, hopefully my little story here that I shared with will make sense. Maybe it'll speak to you. Maybe you're somewhere in this journey. Maybe you're an educator looking for connections, but again, everything happens for a reason. And I think my day to day is perfectly in line with that. So as always, remember, consistent effort over time equals success. Thank you.